I want to give a quick intro to this video. The E92 rod bearing replacement DIY approach. Just some clarification before we get into the video. I haven't posted a lot of YouTube videos. I haven't done any editing in the past, and this video was kind of an impromptu opportunity to capture a few of the aspects of changing the rod bearings, tried to catch areas where there might be some gotchas or some pro tips that we can call out. I haven't found a lot of real how-to videos online for doing the rod bearings for the E9X M3. So wanted to, since we're going to the trouble of getting a lift and replacing these rod bearings, I pulled out my iPhone and captured some moments. It took us right around 9 hours to do the rod bearing swap, and we also did the engine mounts and replace the fluid in the rear end. So again, I'm sure the editing, if you will, or the way that I string these bits of video together leaves a lot to be desired, but hopefully some value will be derived from it. The rod bearings didn't look like they were approaching catastrophic situation, but they didn't look great. And this is what we've been seeing from pictures of replacing these rod bearings in other vehicles. My M3 is a 2009 with 62,000 miles on it. I just bought it a couple thousand miles ago used, and I didn't have a lot of information about how the previous owner had driven it and maintained it, etc. So before I put a lot of miles on this car myself, I wanted to go ahead and replace the rod bearings because, as we all know, a new engine is very expensive and rod bearing failure is catastrophic. So we'll get into the video. Not sure what else to add at this point, but welcome feedback. This again is not a step-by-step from end to end. It's really just for those interested in a rod bearing replacement in the M3, some snippets of that work. And again, it really wasn't meant to be an end-to-end video. So I appreciate anyone who's watching. Hope this helps you out.
So the engine support goes from the fenders, both fenders, to this hook that's in front of the engine.
Yeah.
And we just apply some pressure here because the engine mounts are still connected, so we can't really raise the engine, but we want some support because we're going to take off the subframe from the bottom. So we just make this relatively tight. We put something, we're going to close the hood, and we put something there so we don't damage it. We're good in the top of the car. We can raise it. Cool. So what we need to do is we unhook the side piece with all these bolts here.
Yep.
And then here we spin it, extract it, and then we can pull it down.
All right.
And so these bolts do not need to be removed.
Okay. Pro tip.
Yeah, exactly. We need to remove the height sensor for the headlights because now when we drop the subframe we may snap it. So
that's this little plastic guy here. Just one little bolt. Working on pulling off the plate. We got all the felt covers off.
Don't forget the one in here.
And there's
not visible.
There's a bolt right here in the jack lift spot.
No.
What was it?
Not quite. Not quite. These are not really the oil pan. This is just holding on this brace here.
Okay.
So we remove all these bolts that hold the brace on, and then we move on to the actual oil pan. Well, once we remove this up. Here, to not remove the pan, we're just moving these pipes out of the way. There's a bolt here, 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 and at the end. You have 4 holding these pipes on. These are the power steering pipes. So these take some Torxes. They also take some 10s, I believe, here. It just removes the bracing in front of these connectors. And you need that to access these larger female Torxes, because that's holding on the backside of the
oil pan.
All right.
So we've removed this brace for the cabling for the cat sensors, the O2 sensors, and so here are the female Torx bolts.
Yep.
You have to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. The ones further up, they do not need to be removed because the oil pan finishes here. So this is the
Gotcha.
last one that's hooked onto the oil pan. So for the subframe bolts, we have bolts here, 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 and here. So these two, this one and this one, are 18ers,
Okay.
whereas this one and this one are 16ers, just like all the ones we removed from the reinforcement plate. So just remember that you need 16 and 18.
All right. Wait up.
The felt is getting caught there.
That's good. Anything else? Looks like it's...
No, you're good.
It's coming. Yeah, that's a bolt.
That's a bolt.
Same on this side.
Just don't want to.
That's out. Subframe is loose. So what you need to do is turn the wheel until that external Torx is in line for you to be able to crank it from here. You can do that by
yeah, I see.
rotating the wheel. You see there?
Yep.
That's exactly what we need.
Was this the one where you guys put like the tape on it to line it up?
So some people put tape. It looks like there's only one way to put it back in. There's if you take the top one off, there's only one way to put it back in. So we've never run into an issue with that.
Sure.
Can you get in there?
Yeah. I don't know. Can you see anything there?
Yep.
No, no. That didn't work. There, you see? So you have something that shows that first one
Yep.
is showing
So when we go
where
to
you
put
need to be. So when we put it back in, if it's not there, you did it wrong.
it, all right.
Okay. So that was the last thing that was holding up the subframe. Yes, and as we suspected, so that's another thing we have to remove from the DIY. That large
It's poking
notch
yoke.
there, yes, means it's idiot-proof. Or error-proof, if you want to be politically correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, good. You drop the subframe.
So now we have access. So that's the thing. Here, now we have access to be able to crank the engine itself, which is always right here. And I see this turning fully. Is it different at all? No. Yeah, either apply logic or be very strict following the guide, because if you remove these bolts of this pulley tensioner before you remove the pulley itself, you're gonna have a nasty, you have a chunk of metal springing into your face, eyes, hands, whatever. So
And just
make sure you follow the right sequence. That is all.
nope, other way.
Wait, don't rest. Okay. I think.
No, I'll take it off the top. Take it off the top.
Okay.
Nice.
One, two.
Okay, let go.
Excellent.
All right, so the belt's off.
Belt's off. So once we have the belt off, what that allows us to do is to remove these bolts and unhook the tensioner, because the tensioner is connected to, as you can see, the oil pan. So we're going to be
Okay.
dropping this when you remove that.
Gotta remove the tension.
Now we need the Torxes and the 10. You see, now the tensioner pulley is free, so now we can remove the rest of these 3 Torxes without issues.
Because they cross from the oil pan up to the back?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, they cross basically to the oil pan. And so they need to be, they're right on the oil pan side, but they prevent access from these that do cross.
Oh,
up to
okay.
the
Gotcha.
bottom.
So if we didn't have to get to those, we could just leave it on.
Yes. But alas, we must remove.
What do you think about Danny?
Where the fuck is, there we go. You know the old pan gets wider in the back. The gasket goes like this to accommodate that.
Okay.
Okay? Yep, just in case.
Oh no, the 13th is the one we need, the shorter one. Looking at that short 13. Take it out. No worries, you do it. No, okay.
You're going to meticulously pull each of these and keep track of them on the board here.
It's coming out. So we remove the support for the pulley. So we just remove the bolts. Make sure we keep the bolts with this support so we don't go crazy thinking that they're one of the oil pan ones.
Okay.
But that's the last piece that's interfering with this coming down smoothly. Or us accessing all the bolts for it to be able to come down smoothly. Yep, there we go. So here I'm just starting to remove the bolts to make an easier job for my brother that's going to completely extract them all. Usually you don't want to be removing all these bolts from two separate places because that's a good way to confuse where the bolts go.
Keep track of them.
Yes. Because getting oil drops in your, open mouth tastes really bad. And it's not very healthy.
Keep your mouth closed, man.
Yeah, but it's hard to keep your mouth closed. Yeah, once you crack the shell, that's when the party begins. Asking for some cardboard or whatever.
To me, that's the last bolt.
I know.
That's fine.
It probably won't just fall down. Nudge it a little bit. Getting dropped. Alright. Last bolt. Okay. And it's out. Bolt crush.
Look at that, the kid cardboard. They bring me every weekend all the cardboard from the bar, but they drink shitty beer. They drink shitty beer over there.
I was telling these guys, you guys drink a lot of beer here in the shop.
No, that's next door. I get the cardboard from the whiskey bar next door.
Okay.
If it wouldn't be Bud Light, that's for sure. That's right, I forgot the freaking disposable ponchos over there.
It's a good call.
We should bring some nice Mexican
What
hats.
about that one?
That's what you need.
I'm a Molson Golden.
So here is where the oil can potentially leak into the bell housing and then
Freaks people
give
out.
you a heart attack when you set it back up. So
We'll make sure to dry this off once the pan is off.
yes.
Okay. So we don't get residual later and
Yeah.
And then
Freak out.
Yes, freak out.
what are you working on, Dan?
We got two bolts up here that hold one of the refrigeration pipes. I think it's, never mind, it's an oil cooler pipe.
Oil cooler pipes. Don't forget to pull those bolts.
It's going to fall down.
There we go. Out. Yeah. There we go. All pan out.
All right.
That was the first peek you can take inside the actual engine. Looks beautiful. Great color.
All right. I like to hear that.
Yeah, that owner.
Frequent oil changes, so the engine is looking good.
A good view I can get here.
Sorry, I'm just trying to illuminate.
Yep.
Can you see it?
Yep.
In a second we'll see it much better.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna pop this, we're gonna take it off around the subframe.
So, it can be taken out without, in the DIY, we show that we take out this pipe, the fat pipe up front, okay, in order to remove the oil pan. However, you can do this without removing that pipe. So the less things we touch in a car, the less probability that we're gonna screw something up. So we'll try to do it without that. That's how all this oil ends up in the housing and then freaks people out later. You see, there's oil all over the place here.
Yep.
And note that we had fully drained both holes, and there's still all this oil in there. So, hence the ponchos.
And keeping your mouth closed.
And keeping your mouth closed. I still need to work on that.
Okay. Anyway. Alright, should we go off on that side or if we do it on the other side?
Like rotating it that way?
Yeah. That's right. Yes, right there. Okay. I think. This is still an option. Oh, hitting the oil. Okay. Got it? Okay.
All right, it's out.
Our oil pan. You see how much oil we're left with over here?
Yeah.
Even though we
And
drained
look
it
at
fully.
inside all these baffles.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of oil on there.
And this shows how baffled the S65 oil sump is and why we don't have cooling, why we don't have issues at the track, because the oil can't leave.
No, this is a truck.
In turns.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It
The oil
stays
gets accumulated here.
in here, and it all stays.
And then there's a front sump here and a rear sump. So we're gonna have to empty this thing out. Give it to me. Okay.
Yes. What car is this, Jeff?
Turn around.
So we'll see how much oil comes out of an empty oil pan.
That's after everything that already leaked out.
No, there's no little ones. Gary was just looking for some.
Oh yeah, that's quite a bit of oil. Man.
And that was empty. So
That's why frequent oil changes, they're not so silly, because the amount of oil that stays in the engine every time, you see how it keeps going.
Yep. Plus whatever went on the floor earlier.
and plus what's in the oil coolers. So and the piping. So it's a significant amount of oil that's not changing even like this. So let's just leave it.
All right, what do we got?
You can see here you have a cap. There you have one of the caps.
Another one of the caps.
An actual bolt. So
Yep.
we were in the guts of the engine.
So here's where the rod bearing job actually starts. Because now we have to remove the caps, and then we can actually access the rod bearings. But before that, we need to remove these oil lines that are in the way.
Okay. And so those O-rings that I bought go. Are they where they connect there?
Yes.
Okay.
Under that and under this.
Yeah, those optical systems aren't really that cheap.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I told him, first of all, it's not going to be something easy. You're going to be able to get away with it without pulling the permit. That's first. With an inspection sticker on it. They should get the whole removal and asbestos in that house. For that house, the house is basically 3/4.
So whenever we're touching things in here, and I got one on my face, you want to make sure that your gloves are nice and clean because these are already the engine internals. You don't want to be picking up stuff off the floor and then tinkering around with any of these.
That's why we use two different people. So one person grabs stuff and the other one only touches the inside of the engine.
Gotcha.
It's very tempting when a bolt falls to grab it, but
Yep.
do not do that.
That's it, I mean, take all that drywall down the place, that's lockdown. I'm all about sirens, ceilings are pretty open. Again, this house, is also, prefab, which is pretty cool. So they spray everything in the ceiling, all the
Alright, so those are all the torques, the rest are good old 10.
scrape, to get that out, and that's actually better when it's sprayed foam because it's soundproof. So, you know, so you gotta scrape that shit off there, that's so much water. That's okay, I'll believe it. It's a real.
See all these drops? Those are the ones that end up on your face,
Yeah.
in your hair, in your mouth,
Constant dripping.
constant, and it'll never stop. So, I mean, if you want to leave it like this overnight, it's not a bad idea. However, all of these pipes are also full of oil. So even if you leave it overnight, then you'll have less dripping here. But then when you pull out a pipe, then you have more dripping. Same thing when you rotate the crank. You rotate the crank, you think it's stopped dripping, and then you get a whole bunch of new drip. So all these are the ones that have blue Loctite.
Say Loctite.
Sometimes it takes a little bit more juice to break the Loctite before it starts spinning freely. Don't forget to put that Loctite back when you reassemble. You do not want one of these bolts falling around and wreaking havoc down here. Yes, it's still inserted though, you see? As soon as anything starts moving, you get additional little currents of oil, which are always exciting.
I'm laughing with you.
Exactly. Alright. Yes, so we just have to. Alright. So we try to do it one at a time.
So this is a pickup, and this is a return.
This is definitely the pickup, and this could be the return. One of them. One of them.
And then the one up front is another
That's
pickup.
the front pickup.
Yep.
Alright, hold this. Alright, so we'll get this guy off first. Just wiggle it side to side. Remember, it's going to be full of oil. You see? Whoa.
and that's the O-ring we replaced right there. There's no documented issues with these at all, but if you're in there and it's $1,
We'll do it.
High school with my wife. Oh, yeah. They graduated in '84. Yeah, Jamie is like.
So 2 O-rings, one on the front of each of those pipes.
Yeah. Definitely never seen oil come out this clean. And it's more.
see how much oil.
That's $140 worth of oil that we just dumped out.
Necessary
Yep. Price of progress.
price of progress. Exactly. Underbelly the engine in all its glory.
Draw your cup.
Gotta pull that bracket off.
Well, gotta pull the bracket off because we won't be able to access like these guys.
Gotcha.
We can access those, but not these. So bracket needs to come off. And this guy, if I remember right, it has a serious amount of blue Loctite on it.
What was it?
It has a fairly serious amount of blue Loctite on it,
Okay.
holding these bolts up. Because that's what is holding the whole thing. So I need the first.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is if he's here tomorrow, he'll be out here by us. Yes, the lob's over, that's what I told him to.
See that?
Yep.
It's not something that we've. I mean, when we did it the first time in the E46, and we were, what, a month doing it? I mean, we would do it like odd weekends, and then, maybe there were a couple weeks we didn't do it at all.
Wow, you had it on stands for a month, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we had a full lift. Like
We had a
this.
lift, so we just had it on the lift.
Oh, okay.
We were working, so it wasn't
Yeah.
an issue. But of course, it kind of, we weren't as organized with what we were doing with everything. And so that's how you lose pieces. And you forget how you uninstalled.
Especially over weekends.
Yeah, I mean, what did I do a month ago? I don't know. Which one went first? Where does this bolt go? It's impossible. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So clear, uninterrupted access to everything, as you can see. You see the actual.
Put your hands up. Yes.
I mean, for 60,000 miles, they're not half bad at all. It must have not been.
They're delaminating the bottom.
Where is it delaminated?
You're moving them with your hand. This?
Shine your light up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with ours. The stock one's not.
Yeah, it's probably broken on the top. Oh, look, yes, you're right. Look here.
This one too?
God,
can
look,
see the
look,
rip?
look from here. Look from here. So you see this rip here, and that piece is part of the motor mount. These are not supposed to be two separate pieces. So all this movement
Look at that.
is not. I mean, this is broken. It's
Yeah.
completely broken.
And this is common for these. How quickly do you think they break down?
So we opened another one up with 30,000 miles, and it wasn't destroyed like this is,
Yeah.
but it was already showing signs of significant fatigue. So I would swap them out. It depends if you take it to the track, depends how bumpy your roads are. But like the Northeast,
Yeah.
replace them every 30,000 miles.
Oh wow.
There's no point in stretching it out. It's just going to make your ride more bumpy, less comfortable.
Okay.
So, I mean, the problem is being able to access this.
Definitely while you're in here, you got to replace.
Definitely. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It's an absolute no-brainer.
And you said that you guys replaced in one of your cars. You did more solid motor mounts.
Yes. And the one that
No,
we
they're not
use,
solid. They're still rubber.
Still rubber.
they're firmer rubber though. So that's the one for the track.
Uh-huh.
Although you have to be very clear on what you're using the car for, because it introduces a significant amount of vibrations and idle.
At idle.
And
Okay.
idle.
As
So
soon as you drive, you're good. If you were to raise the idle in your car to 900 or 1,000, you'd be good.
Wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
you wouldn't know.
Can you tell any difference in the way it drives? No, it just they'll last longer likely, right?
Honestly, I don't know. Probably the DCT shifts feel better now than they did before, but they felt so good before with the OEM GTS software that I don't know.
Yeah. So you're opening up the new bearings, the BE?
Here we have some nice B bearings and the BE spec ARP bolts, which is really the only way to do this job, because the OEM bolts don't have any issues, but the torque procedure is very complicated, and I guarantee your shop is not going to do it correctly. And then you have the regular the regular ARP bolts, which are too strong and have been shown in both the E46 and the E92 to distort the cap. So you don't want that either. This is the only solution to do it easily and safely. There we have the bolt. It's the ARP 2000. That's the name.
And these are manufactured by
By Clevite to a spec that the BE bearing people came up with. There's a really long thread in the forum if you're interested, which goes over how and why these bearings were created. But with these bearings, you're back to a copper construction, copper lead, like the original bearings in the pre-2000, like mid-2010 cars.
like what we're gonna pull out.
Exactly. That means that now we can do black salt analysis on the bearings since new, if we want to.
Right.
So that's a big.
Because the new ones are harder, and it'll hurt the crank before.
Yeah, before wearing out. Yes.
Just cleaning up some residual oil here, so we have access.
The pack we received has standard lower and plus 0.25 upper. They're not all like this. Sometimes you have standard up, top and bottom, but you can tell which is which because each one has a little engraving. This has 0.025. What if you look at it like that? Okay.
Yep.
And the other ones have standard. Okay.
Hang on. Yep, standard.
Okay, so based on this, we'll put the standards in the bottom and the 0.25s in the top. So we'll separate them to make sure we're distinguishing them.
Okay. And when these come fresh from the factory, they need cleaned or prepped in any way?
We'll run a cloth through them and we will use some assembly lube, which is somewhere here. No, this assembly lube is only for the bolts, for the
that
ARP
came with the bolts.
bolt. There's a different type of assembly lube for the bearings, or you use oil.
Okay.
Okay, so you can use either one. It's up to you. Nice, thank you. That's what we're going to be using.
All right.
Okay, and it says clearly pre-lube bearings. Okay,
Very good.
these have so much. In theory, what I hear is that they have so much zinc and moly that you're supposed to do another oil change in like a few thousand miles.
Okay.
Okay.
All cleaned out.
Exactly. You want to clean out any oil that's gotten in there, because if not, it will leak out and create severe heartburn. So you want to make sure you get all the oil that might have leaked while you're extracting the oil pan through here. Get all nice and dried out. so that if any oil is there, that means it's actually a problem.
So we have the lowers, the uppers, bolts.
It's 50 foot-pounds.
All right.
Okay. Do you want to put another set on this? Or do you want to copy that?
I think we'll borrow one of his extensions. Let's see how we do this. Alrighty.
You guys have definitely improved your operation.
Yes?
Absolutely.
You like this?
No, I'm noticing like your time of doing the job, you're much more fluid.
Oh yes.
Experience, right?
That's what happens the first time. Yeah, but the second.
The learning
third.
curve, you got it. It's. I'm impressed.
Yes, thank you. It's definitely a lot more fluid now. Okay. So, what you need to do is first make sure you have access to both here. And ideally, I mean, what I like doing is not only access to one side, so in this case cylinder 8, but also cylinder 7. So you see we have access to 4 bolts there without having to turn the engine.
Just saying, I parked it perfect.
That's when you turn off the engine, it always stops in the same position.
Ah, okay.
So this is what
Nice.
yours will look like too.
Okay.
For all you watching the
take
video.
credit.
You can't take credit for it. You have to credit the engineers that made it always stop in the optimum position to be able to turn it back on.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's always here. Yeah, and then
Learning something new every day.
to remove it, simple as. So remember, since these are torqued past their point of elastic deformation, I got one on my face again. I'm talking too much.
We all appreciate it. You getting oil in your mouth on our behalf.
Well, it's the second time today. It won't be the last. So, yes, since these bolts are torqued beyond their point of elastic deformation, in other words, you're permanently deforming them when you torque them. That's what happens with the old OEM bolts as opposed to the new ones. You'll notice that when you remove them, it's not like a usual bolt that it's very high torque and then it immediately releases. I've already spun it a quarter of a turn, but it's still just as high effort.
Interesting.
So that's normal, and it's only because of the way of the torquing procedure of these OEM bolts, which is precisely part of the problem with retorquing them correctly. And although you are a glutton, unless you're a glutton for punishment and you love angle torquing things and are willing to have a slew of spare bolts to be able to, every time you screw up and you run out of 90 degrees, for example, when doing the torquing, and you just have to extract it, remove it, and do it again, just go with the ARP bolts.
So it has to be on these OEM. It has to be one fluid motion all the way through.
It's a whole procedure, but yes, the final step is 90 degrees. So think like from here,
Yeah.
and look at where the torque wrench is. Look at the amount of things that it can run into.
Yep.
From here to here in one fluid motion,
Okay.
and you have to do 90 degrees. So not 70, not 100, 90. So doing that is, and of course it's very high tension as well. So it's really not a simple procedure. It's not.
It's probably even more complicated when you get up towards the front of the motor.
Exactly. It's all of them.
Yeah.
So you might think, oh, that's not that bad. You just get the right extension, you can do it. But think right under here, you have to be doing the same thing on all of them.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's an absolute no-brainer. You
Yep.
get these bolts, you set it to a torque, and you tighten it to the torque. You over tighten, you release it, you torque it again. It'll make your life a lot easier. Be the best $500 you ever spent. So well, back to the actual process here. Okay, so they're both loose. Take these off. Notice I'm using clean gloves because I'm touching the insides of the motor. And you'll notice that when I take this off, more often than not, very pretty bolts.
Yep.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with these bolts. It's not that they're bad bolts, but the fact that you need to have such a complicated procedure, it's not worth it. I mean, I've done the procedure in the E46M. I did that. We did that. We did it more than once, actually. It's not worth it. So, what you need, since these are cracked, and you'll understand what cracked means in a bit, it's on pretty solidly. So you need to give it some loving taps, and it'll come off. And it comes off
All right.
with the bearing in there. And cracked is this. So you see how that surface is not polished?
Yeah.
It's a rugged surface. It's like that on both sides. You just can't see this as well. The way they do this is that's forged as a single piece. They freeze this part here, and then tap it. They tap it for it to crack. So instead of sawing through it and then having surfaces that won't mate as well, they crack it. So this is literally the 1/2 of a, think of splitting an apple and then putting it back together. That's exactly what's going on. Instead of cutting the apple and then the surfaces, and in the case of an apple, it'll seem like it's better, but this is the best mating surface that you'll have. You'll notice all the texture there.
Yeah.
So of course,
It'll interlock.
it'll interlock, and the contact surface is much better with this kind of cracking procedure. So the issue, of course, is that each one of these is unique. So if you go, oh, let's reinstall it like this, you will blow your engine. Fortunately, though, you'll see that you have numberings. There you go.
Yep.
See? Numberings. And then if you notice up there, if you film over here, you'll be able to see the number on this side. See? 370. So although we are going to only do one at a time and do everything in order, it is possible to extract them all and then figure out which goes with which by knowing that
370 goes on the side of
370 goes on 370, and you see this side has nothing.
Yep, because they were stamped when it was 1.
Exactly. They're
And then-
stamped when it's 1, it's cracked, and then it's 1-on-1.
Okay.
You see all the oil that's coming out, right?
Yep.
So that's part of the whole party that gets in your
Looks
face.
like that bearing was well oiled.
They're all well. So what you do is, you see what I'm doing is I'm putting my fingers around, pushing it back to be able to have it come across. And look, see how ugly that bearing is there?
Yep, there's definitely some wear going on.
Definitely some wear. So the way to extract it, if we go back here, is usually just by nudging it gently to the side. So you see how you can move it like that?
Yep.
You gotta be careful you don't drop it. I mean, these we don't care very much about because of the old ones. But the new installation is basically the reverse of what we're doing here. So you'll notice that all bearings have a little notch here.
Yep.
And on the side of the end cap, you see the little notch. So what you usually do is you line up the notch, you put it in there, and you'll notice that it doesn't fit in immediately. It just stops there.
Yep.
but what you do is you make sure this side is up on the right side where you want it to end up, and then you pop it in.
Okay.
So that's how you install it.
Is it perfectly flush on both sides when you're done? Is that the expectation?
It is relatively perfectly flush. There is a little bit of a gap between the top and the bottom in terms of bearings. They don't jam against each other. But I don't know if you noticed, I just pushed this one down a little bit with my finger.
Yeah.
It is possible to, you see there? How I just nudged this one up?
You can rotate it a bit.
Yes. So you see now that one's a little bit lower. And if I push this down, I just slid the whole bearing up so that it's both flush.
Okay.
So now the complicated piece is, this is very easy to work on because it's in your hand. But up there, it's the exact same procedure of both removal and assembly, but you have to be working in that wonderfully tight space. So practice with the bearings out here on how to rotate, remove, and line up the notch, putting it on the right thing, and reassemble like that. Practice doing this because you're gonna have to be doing this by feel behind the journal.
Okay.
So do that a few times, get comfortable with the movement, how it feels, and the first one might take you a little bit to do, but as soon as you've done 2 or 3, it'll be, you know, you'll be whistling Dixie by the time you get to 7 and 8.
All right.
So that's really it, and now it's just rinse and repeat across all the cylinders.
All right, and I want to keep track of where we pulled them out so that we can kind of look at the wear, right?
Exactly. That is key. So you want to be seeing which are the, you'll notice which are the bottoms and which are the tops, but you do want to have a record of which is number 8, 7, etc.
Okay.
So all this, the bottom one,
Great. And we don't see, is there wear there?
Here? Yes, there's some, but we'll see it better once they're all
All
clean.
cleaned up.
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
So we got a couple ready to go in over here. And these are already lubed.
Yes, with some assembly lube. This is the bottom, so that there.
It's the bottom because it says standard STD.
Yes. There. It's in.
All right, so you're pulling out the top bearings.
So you push it up a little bit to be able to have some wiggle room, and then, like I showed in the previous part, you rotate and extract from one side. You want to try to have it not drop when you pull it out. Now it looks very pretty.
Yeah, glad we're in here.
Absolutely. You're always glad when you do this.
Okay. Do you want a bearing there? The top bearing?
Yes, I want a top bearing.
Okay.
Here we go.
Have
Nice loop. Yes. So remember the notch. We look for what side the notch is at. In this case, the notch is here. So we want to line up notch with notch, and then put it in, and then push it in just like we did when we saw it outside. So
Is that fitted? You put it on there that one? Yeah, okay, yeah. Just wanted to make sure.
see, line up the notch. And you push it all the way in. And it's in. See? There we go.
Yep.
Brand new bearing and nice and flush on this side. Since they rotate, it's not critical that you're trying to measure every millimeter there, but you do want it more or less flush to be able to then pull it straight and gently pull it back down onto the journal. There you go. And so now we just need to put the other side back on, and remember, we're going to be matching up the numbers here. Do not screw that up. So we only do one at a time. We fully complete every cylinder because it's really not worth it to have a whole bunch of them and then not remember which one you did, which one you didn't.
So it's hard to see on the camera, but I can see the number on this side. We're lining up to the other number.
Number.
Yep.
And remember, it's only on one side. And then that.
So notice the bolt. It has ARP lube through the thread and on the flat part of the head as well. So first we'll thread it by hand.
It's useful to have a helper holding the cap up, as you can see.
Yeah, see how you can see that both pieces up there essentially become one.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't see
Can't
the
even see
mating
the line.
surface at all. Precisely because they're cracked.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Notice we're not really using any tool for this. We're just
Making sure they're nice and
using
threaded,
the head
clean.
and an extension to thread it by hand. And now we'll use the torque wrench to tighten both up. And like everything, it's not strictly necessary, but it's advisable to, instead of going from hand tight to torque spec in one go, like doing it in at least one intermediate step, that takes you halfway-ish.
Yeah.
You do one halfway-ish, the other
So
halfway-ish,
that kinda
and then
seat and-
exactly, you're seating them both in.
Okay.
So that's always good practice. Just like when you're torquing a wheel on a star pattern. So these gloves are gone.
So the
Yeah. All right.
I'll go ahead and work as my hands
50 foot-pounds.
50 foot-pounds.
So remember, foot-pounds. Everything else is new here. This is foot-pounds. We're tightening both sides.
See, we got to 32.8.
Okay, so currently at 32.8.
Yeah, and now we'll go ahead and tighten to the beeps. This is gonna be low, 48.2. Do a little more.
Stop. 49.8.
49.8.
Yep, I'll do the same on the next one. .6. So see, we went to 53 8.6. So as these are multi-use, we can undo what we've done. And go ahead and do it again. $50.0.
55.
And that's the process.
Do that 7 more times.
Exactly. So back to moving. So we got to change the head. So if you'll notice, the head sizes are pretty dramatically different. The good thing about that is that it reminds you, it's very easy to see which ones you've already done, which ones you haven't.
So the ARP are smaller.
Yes.
The head is smaller.
Cover the threads and the flat part of the head.
Very disciplined in the replacement of gloves.
Because the ARP assembly loop is not the same thing as the rod bearing assembly loop. So we don't want to have a glove that has some of the ARP stuff and then ends up on the bearing surface. The assembly loop is almost like, feels a little like blue Loctite. Really sticky stuff.
So there's 7 lower.
Put them the one down here. And leave that, the cap, leave it, give it to me. Because that goes inside the cap. Okay, good. You see, my hands are clean from any ARP stuff. They only have oil and rod bearing assembly lube on them.
What do you see? Oh yeah.
Definitely some wear there.
Yeah, it'll be dramatic once we finish them all.
Now we should get down, if it's real bad, we'll see copper, right?
Yes. Here you just have the first layer gone, the lead layer, which is the softest.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not, that doesn't look like it's about to explode. In fact, most of the times when you see rod bearings, they don't look like they're about to explode, but they look more worn than they should be. So, as the only way to see what condition they're in is opening it up, you may as well just replace them when you get there, and that way you don't need to worry about this issue.
And the experts say really you should see nowhere, right?
Correct. There should be nowhere. We're going to open up one of our cars after 100 track days and post the results on the forum. So there we'll see what they actually look like.
And that'll be with the new,
Correct, with the B
the
bearing.
B bearing.
Yeah, that's
Okay, I have one ready for
the new
you.
thing now.
What do you have? Give me the top. I mean, there you go. Okay. So as usual, we look for the notch. notches here, notches there, and we install. You see? This time I did it without having to reach around the cylinder. I mean, there's
Yeah, well done.
plenty of ways you can do it, but
That's expertise.
the key is you want to have it seated all the way in and with it flush here. I mean, obviously on both sides. So then you pull it back in and then gently pull it down until it's seated on both sides. So we can get the cap and pop it on.
The cap ready? Yes. Right.
So we look for the number. There we go, 128. We look here, 128. This time it's on this side. So 128 goes with 128. Sometimes if you feel a little bit of resistance before you are able to mate the surfaces perfectly, that might mean that one of the bearings is slightly shifted, it's slightly rotated within the cap. So you gently push it in and it will rotate the bearings to have them in the right place. So now I'm going to be holding this cap until we have the bolts lubed and ready to be put in.
Ready for the bolts? Yes.
I got a great ink to hold that.
So again, hand tighten it first, then you put on the torque wrench, 50 foot-pounds, and slowly go tightening it over.
All right, so we found that the Dynon underdrive pulley,
Yeah, it doesn't have a 32 millimeter in the center in the crank, so you can't spin the engine through that. So we are spinning it through the alternator. The alternator, surprisingly, has a, let me see, 24 millimeter socket in there. And if you turn this, you can turn the engine. So that's what we're doing.
yep. So Dynon didn't do us any favors. We're looking at this guy,
No, the next one.
this one.
Yeah, that's what's missing. See?
Yeah,
You can tell by the bolts.
that's probably good.
Okay. Yep.
All right, we got 6 done. We're in the last 2. All right, so these are the rod bearings just came out of my 2009 E92 M3 with 62,000 miles. You can see the bottoms don't look too bad, but you can see at the edges they're wearing.
I know, I see.
Right up.
I was supposed today, it goes up.
Not on every one.
Oh, you see that?
See here. So these are the bottoms, working from the front of the engine back. And these are the tops. They're the ones that are really showing the wear. See, they wore through several layers. These should all just be clean, look like new. Alright, all the bearings are replaced, so it's all reverse order now.
Put some blue Loctite on the threads. And now we torque it down.
Yeah, it stops, you know?
Torque stack. Torque it.
So these are 10 Newton meters?
Yes. Just low torque, we don't need to do it in 2 steps.
Alright, all the bearings are replaced, so it's all reverse order now.
Put some blue Loctite on the threads. And now we torque it down. first bag. Okay.
So these are 10 Newton meters?
Yes. Slow torque, we don't need to do it in 2 seconds. So first, the one with the larger diameter slips in, and the one with the smaller diameter.
So larger diameter goes up first, and then the smaller one comes under.
Yes. Obviously, when you're removing it, first the smaller diameter, then the larger.
I'm not sure the mic can hear you.
So, as you can see, the smaller diameter goes on top of the one in the larger diameter
Yep.
in terms of assembly. So, when you're reassembling it, first you need to put the larger diameter and then the smaller diameter.
And these are blue Loctite as well.
Yes, all this is blue Loctite. Excellent. So once you have one of these bolts, either this or that, it holds up the whole assembly, so you can go putting the rest of the bolts in. So we'll have to torque that down in a second before the blue Loctite dries.
I talked to him the other day, he's going in a couple of weeks. Oh, really? He's got enough land. It was funny, he was like, oh yeah, me and my girl went out the other night, right now we've been out and out, and we have another baby.
Okay. Make sure your torque wrench hasn't turned off. Basically, I just need a tiny bit more torque than what my hands can provide.
stroke it, you dry your hands. Okay. If we get the whole past. Not. I'm getting that angle, right? Okay, got it through. Your side well? Well, just leave it here until we get
hair to push forward. You're right, but we can leave it.
There we go. Okay.
Fine, fine.
Do you want to use the support bar already? To bring this thing slowly to place? Or not really?
No, this we hold up directly. Remember, with a couple of bolts, it's this guy. The ground support one. Yeah, so once it's here, we'll get 2 or 3 bolts to just hold it in place, and then we put the rest of them in, torque them down, and then we'll be done with the oil pan. And the rest of it is just reverse of uninstall. 1 bolt at a time. Wait, I want to clean this guy. Definitely some oil, huh? Get some oil. You need a paint on this guy.
guy's in the way.
Yeah, that happened.
Okay, that's held.
So no Loctite for these guys. Just dry bolts.
Just straight up 10 foot-pound. Make sure they're dry of any oil that might have fallen on them. There we go.
Okay. All right, pan is up.
And it's dry.
Needs a whole bunch of bolts.
So now there's no more oil leakage. So now you clean up all the oil and it should stay dry. You also want to make sure that the gasket you place has kept in shape after all the maneuvering. If not, you don't want to have to undo everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys are a mess. What have you been doing?
I don't know. I mean, you know, get into the belly of the beast.
No more Star Wars sand people.
No.
All right, so the pan's back on. Hopefully no more dripping of oil on anybody's faces.
Yeah, it's all in front of that pen anyway. This, yeah, very cool. Yeah.
18 foot-pound?
No, 10 millimeters.
So
That was for
I
something
won't be
else.
able to play Watch.
So 10 bit in there, right?
Yeah. This will be riveting video.
Yes. Especially this part.
All 30.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah. So, you're all this fucking tired.
The gun's very strong, so we got to play that one.
Oh.
At the same time, on Monday, a guy came to a creative vision on a Jeep. He got a year and a half old, he's never been
That's cheap, so
I didn't have time.
just over 500.
I didn't have time to do it.
I know man was telling me, would you fucking nickel put a new motor in his shop?
No, he
Not
asked
talking into it, but.
me. He asked me.
I know, I'm like, dude, why do you care? The truck works so fucking good.
He said, no, he wants to be ready. He said, what do I do?
I'll edit that out.
Well, you can't buy your trucks with engines.
So, here you mount. Completely split.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It does.
Yeah, he told me that. I said, we'll go through it. And I'll either tell you if you fix it, or I have a guy who Kyle does over here, he'll find you money.
Look how much taller it is than this
It
one.
is. It's like a whole nother layer, like level. Yep.
What? I thought so. Double check. Yeah. Okay. Done.
Hand is in.
Where's the wrench you use for the top of the The problem is, oh, I totally destroyed. Oh, am I losing it? Oh, wasn't the key to use the other guy, the one with the bending top? This guy.
Same.
Same deal.
Yeah, completely separated. You can move it with your hand. Separated here as well.
Okay. Don't we put them on the bottom, or we just? So 3 Torxes and a 10 mil. Torxes go on the bottom here. The 10 goes up here. It's not hard without that.
What do these get torqued to then?
Also 10.
Also 10.
So several things. One is that we're gonna do that.
Wait, Nick, don't. Careful, don't.
This we're gonna put in. Okay? Oh, sorry. Raise up, raise up. This up. This will just fit right in. Go ahead, lift. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Wait. I'm gonna get a good view of it, but he's putting the steering connection back together.
Okay, raise.
And I melted it too.
These are just work on these stuff.
It's not.
See where they put the alternator.
No, they take the axle off.
You're gonna have to do a water pump on this? This thing.
Yeah, so the axle, the doors and the axles they come out of the top.
Did we do one of this?
Yeah, and that's
I know, we snuck it through the back.
Yes.
It just isn't all the way in. It just needs more pressure.
Yeah, but it's not applying any pressure when it goes in.
How much was it before you said 5?
No, because it's.
Go off for half and.
I don't think we're bad. You don't want to just continue?
It's pushing it.
Yeah. Right now, the engine mounts are already hitting something. Now lift it up. Let's see what happens.
You guys still hiring down there too?
No, all I'm trying to do is get this in. Oh, you almost ever tried getting this one.
Engine mount. In?
The engine mount is in?
Yes, at least it's poked in. So is this one? What does that look like?
It's not right, but if we do both engine mounts, we're good. Alright, can we keep picking up?
It's those guys, and look, here, these two pieces what we need to line up in the front. That, and then the symmetrical one on the same. Oh, So, as we continue cranking up, go to the other side then. Line up the front guy.
For what? For what? Wait. It is.
And how do we even know if the nipple's in the right spot? How do you know?
Not this one. Tight enough.
It's not all the way up.
Yeah, because I don't know, and I'm waiting for them to bolt.
Keep going up. Okay, this back is jammed outside. It's like that far from the up all the way. So I think that the nipples are not in the right position. How's that one? Exactly, it's the same thing.
Can we reach the mounts to twist them over?
Not this high. It has to be lower.
And we check that the little marker line is still lined up.
Yeah.
It is poker yoke, so
Yeah.
it is error proof.
And that was
You
38,
don't have to.
38 newton meters?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Now we have the engine mounts on the top. So, you want to pick up? Careful because
What's it?
it hits here in the front. It hits things because it's not going to front. There.
There it is. Hang on. There we go.
Okay, that's nice. Okay, we got it all the way up, but the engine mounts on the top are.
My engine mount is in the right spot.
Oh yeah, it's probably in, but I just tiny.
Alright. Should we tighten that or should we make sure everything else gets out first?
The rest gets in.
It's not over. You get it?
Yeah, see, this is the
What the pros handle?
pros do their thing. so bad.
Is that normal?
Look at the middle. You see the color?
Yeah.
That's the metal shavings in it.
Really? Doesn't seem good.
It's fine. It's always.
Always that way.
They always look at this.
All buttoned up. All right.
Everyone. Hey.
Hey.
We have another M3 saved from rod bearing destruction.
Absolutely. We'll see the pictures of the final state afterwards, but they were
Yep.
pretty worn.
Yeah, I will. I'll post this video along with the pictures of the rod bearings. We just finished up. Started this morning by 8:30. It took us
Yeah, it was around 8.5,
8.5 hours. We did
including
the
lunch, so
rear
it's not bad.
diff, lunch. So Danny and Nick, thanks so much for your help. And
Anytime.
Gearhead International.
This is a great place.
Yeah.
We drove 2 hours to get here,
We'll
but
get
it's
the
worth
sign
it.
in here. Yep. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate your help.
Anytime.
Awesome.
All right. Safe travels home.
Good deal.